eventually the hormonal cocktail that you're in when you're in romantic love will die down, and it's supposed to die down. If you were in that intense state all the time, nothing would get done. As anybody knows, that when they're in those initial stages of love, they can't think about anything else. They're practically obsessed with their partner and their relationship, right? Their schoolwork suffers, their work suffers, their relationship with other people might suffer. They don't want to do anything else but be around that individual. And so to stay in that state would mean that, you know, you would not be able to progress in life. So it's supposed to calm down after that. Know yourself. know yourself and know how to communicate who you are to the outside world, whether that's in a romantic relationship or in relationships of any kind. The more you know yourself and the clearer you are about who you are, and you embody your own values, the more likely you are to attract the right people into your life. So it's not about going and finding that person, making a list and like looking out for that person. It's really about becoming that individual and bringing that into the relationship. Because even if you found the perfect person, if you're not that kind of person and you're not living your own sort of values, they can only contribute 50% of that relationship. You're the other half of it. So it's still not going to be your ideal relationship. So know yourself, communicate it clearly, and don't compromise in terms of who you are as an individual.
This week on American Real, love and relationships. For some, relationships come easy. For others, they're frustrating and complex. Our mood, our drive, and our psyche can all be greatly affected by the stability of the relationship we have with our significant other. And as crazy as it sounds, for many of us, our choices when it comes to dating, or ultimately in the partner we choose, comes down to one thing: our upbringing. The observations we made as children of our parents or adult figures closest to us can affect the type of person we're attracted to. Our featured guest, Dr. Kathrine Bejanyan, a relationship therapist, touches on this and more, including nature versus nurture, the importance of communication, and the love bank account each of us has. Dr. Bejanyan also discusses humor and laughter, flirting, and the importance of knowing oneself. Now, if you like this episode, please share it with your friends, connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and don't forget to subscribe to the American Real YouTube channel to receive all the latest updates. I'd like to thank our partners and sponsors, especially Happy Socks, turning an everyday essential into a colorful design item, and Elatura Naturals, the best all-natural skincare products available. Visit elaturanaturals.com to make a purchase, and be sure to use the coupon code AMERICAN at checkout for a very special 20% discount. And now, without further ado, I bring to you Dr. Kathrine Bejanyan.
Welcome to American Real. This is Roger Brooks, and today my very special guest is Dr. Kathrine Bejanyan. Kathrine, thank you for having us here.
Absolutely, and welcome to London.
Your wonderful loft overlooking the Parliament.
Yeah. Yes, iconic view. Yeah.
So tell us about you. Tell us how you ended up in London. You're from the States.
Yes.
Grew up in
originally.
California.
Yeah.
Tell us your story.
Well, I came to London as an undergrad for a couple months and just fell in love with it. The culture, the ability to travel regularly, the types of different people that you encountered. So I just fell in love with it and knew that I wanted to come back. So I came back to the States and finished my degree, did my master's, and then figured out a way to come back here and do a PhD. And since finishing, I ended up settling here. And opening up my own private practice here. And for the time being, I'm here. I love it.
Wonderful. Yeah. So tell us about your work,
Okay.
how you got into this field,
Okay.
and where the interests
Yeah.
came from.
So I'm a therapist, and I work primarily on relationship concerns, so dating and relationships, and I see individuals and couples, as I said, on any kind of sort of relationship issues. I am a trained therapist, period, and in the States, I'm a licensed marriage family therapist in California. But when I decided I wanted to learn more about this field and specialize in it. So I came over here, and my PhD is in sort of social psychology, but with a focus on romantic relationships cross-culturally.
Wow.
So yeah, I learned a lot in the PhD, and I apply a lot of the knowledge that I gain to help people get a better understanding of themselves and of their relationships. And so I work sort of, as I said, I have my own private practice, and I work with individuals, and I try to sort of stay in touch with the academic side by keeping up with all of the latest sort of research in this area.
So let's talk about that, if we could.
Sure.
If you could give us maybe an example or two of why I might come and see you as an individual or as a couple. What do you typically see?
In terms of individuals, I'll generally get people who are just frustrated. They're frustrated in the kind of people they encounter, the kind of people they seem to be dating. They have started to gain a sense that there's a pattern that is sort of they can see in terms of the kind of individuals they end up with, or the kind of relationships that they end up in, and so they want to sort of come in for me to help them either gain a better understanding of their past and what's going on with that, or simply just to help them make better choices in partners. So that's generally when people come in as individuals, that's generally the main concerns. And couples, they're just either a specific issue brings them in, or just generally there's a lot of conflict. And there's most of the time they're coming in because there's an intention to stay together, and they just don't know how to go about resolving their differences.
So if we go back to the individuals first, I know a lot of people say, I tend to date the same type of person.
Yeah.
I put myself, whether it's the man or the woman, I put myself in these situations, or I'm attracted to this man that's, maybe abusive or not.
Yeah, or unhealthy.
Or unhealthy,
yeah.
right. And so how do you help them see that, admit it, break through, and try to change those habits?
Yeah. Ideally, if someone comes in that kind of a state where there was already a recognition that there is a pattern, that's ideal. Because once you recognize that there is a pattern, then the common denominator in that pattern is you. And so in that sort of particular situation, then we go through the history of the relationships, and as therapists, there's a reason why we always ask, tell me about your childhood, because a lot of our understanding how a relationship works is imprinted from our earlier years, in how our parents interacted with us and the relationships we saw around us, again particularly with sort of our parents, and that leaves a definite sort of unconscious almost imprint on it, and that we keep repeating and playing out. So on the surface, the people we choose might look really different from one another, and this is why sometimes it takes a while for people to get it, because consciously they're trying to choose people that are not like what they experienced in the past, particularly if they're coming from like an abusive background or a childhood home where, let's say, their father was an alcoholic and was unavailable and finances were always an issue. So reacting against that, they might sort of choose to be with people that don't have drinking issues, that are really invested in the work that they do and such. But on the outside, they're trying to pick people that are different, but they end up in similar types of relationship dynamics where they feel unfulfilled. Maybe the guy's a workaholic. He's similarly to the father, is just unavailable emotionally. He's not around. And so that's the kind of patterns that we sort of peel away the layers and try to look at. How does that happen?
So how does an individual become attracted to that type of person? What is it? Are they attracted to the certain trait or the quality of the person? Is it a physical thing?
Yeah, it's a little bit of all of that. It happens so early on that, when you think of a child being born into the world, they have no idea how this world works. They have no idea who they are in this world. They have no idea, what their place is, what relationships are, what it's all about. So their sort of very early years in the home teaches them what the world is going to be like, and teaches them who they are in the world, what they deserve, and how relationships work. It's sort of a recording. They sort of record the world up until about around sort of 8, 7, even earlier than that. And so if you grow up in a home where you're not getting a lot of love and nurturing, or your parents, just for whatever, they don't even have to be abusive, they just might not be available. There's things going on in their own marriage, or they're too busy trying to financially sort of provide, and so they're working a lot, whatever it is. Children are very egocentric. The world sort of revolves around them. So when parents are not available for whatever reason, they make assumptions that this is about me. They make interpretations, and so that sort of settles in. Then you see yourself as a certain type of individual, deserving of a certain type of relationship. And the sort of point is, as we sort of get older, we draw those types of people into our adult life because it gives us an opportunity to work through those childhood issues, some of those pains. And if we can come through it, then we can heal some of the stuff that happened early on that we had no control over. We didn't have control over how our parents treated us, right? So we can tell them to be more available, or to parent us a certain way, or discipline us a certain way. But when we, as adults, we choose people that in our partners that bring out certain qualities that our parents had, or playing out the dynamics from our childhood, then as adults we have an opportunity to become conscious about that and work through it, and therefore heal our childhood wounds and have a really healthy, great relationship as an adult.
How do you explain or discuss siblings that are obviously born into the same family, grow up, but have different choices of their partner? Is there any science behind that?
So people have looked into that quite a bit, because siblings can be very, very different from one another. And parents will sometimes say, well, it's because, they're just wired differently. It's sort of genetically they're different. So one was born a certain way, one was born another way. And so it's sort of that nature versus nurture. But what we're starting to understand more and more is that nurture has a lot to do with what whatever genes that we're born with, what gets expressed. And although it's the same parents might be in a completely different state of mind. So the first child is born, and maybe they're young parents, they're still they don't know how to parent yet. This is the first time they're doing it. Financially, it might be difficult. They're still building. So all kinds of things. And then a couple of years later, they're in a different space in their lives, and they have a better sense of what children are like and how to parent. And so it's it's subtle messages that people take in. And so just the parents being in different states of mind and a different place in life is going to have a different effect. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So now let's jump back into the couple situation.
Yes, yeah.
So you're seeing couples as a therapist?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And then in addition to that, you have a role within an organization, right?
Yeah.
Where you're helping to put couples together.
Sort of. So
Okay.
I do some consulting outside of my own sort of therapy agency, and the agency you're mentioning is sort of a higher end or dating or matchmaking agency. And the premise behind that agency, it's been around for several decades now, and the premise is to really try to bring couples together based on similar sort of values and character and lifestyle. So in order to do that, you can't just have someone fill out a questionnaire or ask them their likes or dislikes or what they like in a partner, what their interests are. You really have to go a bit deeper. So we do like a 3 to 5 hour interview for that initially, and anybody who's interested in joining, and really delve deep into a person's relationship history, their family history, what their childhood was like, all of that, to get a really thorough understanding of them as individuals. And so that's the part that I'm a little bit involved in. I'll occasionally do that bit, the initial interview process, and then if they do decide that it's a good fit from both sides, then we take them on, and then we actually set them up with their own sort of personal advisor, who then does the rest of the matchmaking and all of that. And I'm just available throughout that process, and them dating different people and sort of developing relationships. If there are any difficulties or they want better insight, to come in and see me for that.
I see.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
In your practice itself, you're seeing couples on a regular basis for relationship therapy?
Yes. Yeah. That's couples. Couples quite a bit find me because of the way that my agency is termed. It's relationship therapy. So a lot of people come in once they have a relationship and things are breaking down. But really, I would encourage anybody out there listening, if you are having a hard time finding a relationship that sort of sparks you up, lights you up, don't wait to find that, and when things go wrong, to seek out help. If you're not in a place yet where you're happy with your sort of relationship life, being single as well, seek out help, because a lot of it starts with who you are. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to sort of think of a relationship as a live organic entity. Whatever two individuals are, those are the qualities they bring into the relationship. And so even in couples counseling, I don't focus too much on the issue itself. The issue has arisen as a result of what two people are putting into that relationship and how they're interacting. So we sort of tease it apart and almost look at the specific ingredients that they're putting in, and that starts with each individual.
Right.
Yeah.
No, and I know from my own marriage, I've been married for 22 years
Oh, okay.
to my wife Sabrina, and I think the key lesson I've learned over the years is mainly to be a good communicator.
Absolutely.
Not to keep things in.
Absolutely.
To discuss things. If there's a problem, approach it. Don't run away from it. So is that something that's a big part of your...
Absolutely. And again, that's you hear a lot in the relationship realm, like one of the key things is communication, right? So why is communication so important? Well, because you are a separate individual from your partner. You've grown up in a different environment. You might come from a different cultural or religious background, whatever it is, family dynamics, and your partner, in order to have a healthy relationship, your partner has to get to understand you, to try to be able to meet your needs. And it's a lot easier when it's not a guessing game on their part. And you can communicate your needs clearly to them, set your standards openly, and they know then how to respond to you, and so vice versa. So yeah, I think it helps both sides when then individuals know themselves really well, know what their sort of triggers might be and what their needs are, and communicate that clearly to their partner and invite them to sort of step in and support them and try to meet their needs, rather than, you know, the silence treatment or whatever. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, I think what people need to keep in mind is that this is someone, if you're in a relationship based on love, and that's the premise, that they love you, right? And so if they've done something to upset you, it does not coming from a malicious place. It's just a lack of understanding. And it sounds simple, but that's what it is. It's sort of a lack of understanding. And so if we can explain it to our partner, they're more than likely to be happy to do it right and to try to meet our needs. I mean, I don't get couples here that are maliciously trying to hurt one another, even if there's a lot of built pain and toxicity in the relationship. It didn't start off that way. It started off by someone doing something that triggered something in their partner from their own, you know, past or baggage, and then rather than clarifying what just sort of happened, the other person reacts back with additional sort of frustration and anger, and then that's sort of a spiral. And so that's what we try to do here, is clean that stuff out, the layers out, and really get to the heart of the matter. But anybody starting out, if they're starting out in a relationship, the best thing to do is try to be as clear about who you are to the person that you're engaged in that relationship with. But again, that starts from each individual. You have to know yourself then, sure, right? To be able to communicate those needs clearly.
How do you address stubbornness? I know, just looking at my past and looking, say, at your family, the aunts, the uncles, the parents, I see a lot of stubbornness. Could be on, you know, the male or the female.
Yeah.
You know, and you mentioned it earlier too, it starts with yourself.
Yes.
If the individual is not willing to open up, to communicate, and they're that stubborn person, as a therapist, how do you break through that, or help break through that?
So generally, when there is a high level of stubbornness or defensiveness, it's because that person feels like they're misunderstood. So I have to keep changing myself for you. And yet I have needs as well. And so you don't address the stubbornness head on, like you're being really resistant, you're being really difficult. It's underneath that, they're trying to protect something. And so if we can go underneath that and express whatever need that individual has as well, then they're a lot more likely to be able to open up and hear their partner as well. But that's what sort of tends to happen, is both of them come into the relationship and they don't really know what the other person's needs are and feel like they're doing and not getting their needs met, and all their partner is doing is being critical and difficult. And so they start sort of shutting down, like, I'm tired of having to give, I'm tired of having to change for you. And so it's a defense mechanism, but it's coming from a place of not feeling heard and nurtured themselves. So so we sort of go beyond that and try to understand, what are your needs, and how much effort have you been putting in and feeling like it's not sort of getting anywhere. And that usually sort of brings the tension down in the room.
Is there a tool or something that you might be able to offer people that are listening, if they have a partner that is stubborn? Is there something that where do they start? How do they get past that defense, mechanism that they're facing on a daily basis?
So when I see partners here in session, generally I'll try to get one to sort of open up and talk about their needs. And as they do, it comes across as criticism to the other person, like they failed somehow. And so then the reaction is, yeah, but you're saying you want this, but the other day I did 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm doing all this for you. And so they get sidetracked. So I would say really try to sort of sit down and hear each other out. Just hear where your partner is feeling like they're let down or they're not getting their needs met, again, it's not a direct reflection on you. It might have been as simple as you didn't realize, you didn't know. So be careful about reacting back, trying to prove that you do love them or you have done, because that immediately shuts the other person down and it backs them up, and they're now having to prove their point, prove why they're justified in wanting those needs or having those needs. And so you sort of get sort of sidetracked. So if you guys can just give each other some space to open up and talk to one another, regardless of how it's coming across. Again, sometimes it does come across as criticism. If you can hear beyond the criticism, and we always say as therapists that anger and frustration, they're secondary emotions. Underneath anger is always pain and hurt and vulnerability. And when we don't get our needs met, it's sort of a defense mechanism, right? Or anger is like a way to go about getting those needs met. So if you can hear beyond that and hear beyond the anger to the vulnerability to whatever sort of missing, then that would be an ideal, and then you just sort of open up that space, and once your partner just feels heard, you don't have to work on solving the issue, just give them the space to express themselves.
Right.
And then you express your feelings, and that's it, and the tension sort of, again, goes down, and you can actually then look at the real issue rather than getting sidetracked.
That's great. How important are doing the little things in a relationship?
Oh my God, so significant.
Leaving a card, sending a text.
So significant. Yeah, and I can't emphasize how significant they are. Because, so as simple as it is to think about it in terms of this, think about it as like a love bank account. A lot of sort of therapists have used that term, where you're constantly putting bit of sort of monetary, like love.
Contributions,
yeah,
right?
Yes, yeah, and so that's building up. And so when there is a breakdown in communication, when there is conflict, when there's problems, and you sort of deduct from the bank account, you're still in the good. But when you're not doing those little things, you're not building it up. And so you're not solidifying the trust and the love and the connection in the relationship. And so it just takes one silly conflict, one silly misunderstanding to knock everything down, to put you in the negative. So that the everyday is really what sort of counts in building the depth of the connection and building the trust. So that when your partner comes home and they're just like having a really bad day, it's their, they misplaced their anger. Maybe they were angry with a coworker or a boss or whatever it is, and it comes out at you. You already have enough of a buffer in that relationship and enough of trust and understanding of one another to know that wasn't about you. It was misplaced, and not to react to that. But when you don't take the time to build that love on a regular daily basis, and you're already sort of the love tank is already at a low, and they come home and they react with frustration on you as well, it's really easy for that then to, go into something else.
Right, that's good. Laughter. How important is laughter?
Yeah, humor and laughter are a key because they really build the connection between two people, and they take away from the tension. So one of the things that when we've observed healthy relationships, we've seen that there is a lot of humor and laughter in that, and in like moments of conflict and frustration and tension, one of them will make a joke or sort of an inside experience that it's only the two of them understand, and it'll just break that tension. It'll just break them out of that, intense standoff, as you will. And so, but again, that sort of comes from daily basis of having that ease and playfulness and laughter in the relationship. Otherwise, if you don't have that and one of them makes a joke while you're arguing, it's sort of hurtful. It could actually be expressed in a way as like sort of passive aggressiveness or whatever it is. But so again, all of this stuff is important to maintain that on a regular basis. You should be sort of practicing. But definitely bringing laughter and ease into the relationship takes away from the tension of buildup of frustration and conflict.
Okay. Let's talk about, I know something that, in my circles and over the years, I don't think is talked about a lot, and that's people being flirtatious.
Yeah.
So you're out at dinner and, friends or new people, and, there's a lot of flirtation going on. Can you talk about that? And
okay.
I don't know either way what's good, bad, but is there a standard for that?
Standard for that. I think that it's going to be determined by individual relationships. And the reason I say that is each of us has a past we're coming from, right? And so if you've had a past where you've had people cheat on you, or even if you've been the one cheating, that's something that's now available to you in your mind as a possibility. And so when you see flirtatiousness, your partner flirting with, whoever it is, the waiter or somewhere else at a party, it's easy to go there because you've seen that. It's easy to say, okay, I can see the steps. It's sort of starting out and I'm going to end up hurt again. Or I've done this. I see myself and I know naturally where I would end up. And so it comes from our past quite a lot. And so to know ourselves, but if you're someone that has never had anybody cheat on you, or you've never engaged in that kind of a behavior, the flirtatiousness is sort of contained because you don't have a natural outcome for that, and you don't have a trigger. So it's not, you might not like it, maybe find it sort of disrespectful or whatever it is, but you can have a conversation about it. Whereas, so for instance, I actually had a friend of mine, so she and her husband were watching this comedian, and he made a joke about cheating, and her husband laughed, and he thought it was funny, and she found that so offensive, and she found that so hurtful, and they ended up getting in a really big fight about it, because she found it as disrespectful to women, and attributed a lot of things to that, and so she was talking to me about it, and knowing her past, I know her parents had issues with cheating, and for a while they broke up, and then they got back together again, and so there was a tenderness there was a softness there, and that's what that brought up, the anger and the frustration, and what she saw with her parents, the conflict that it had created, and that came out towards her husband. And so once she sort of understood where that was, I sort of encouraged her to go back to him and talk about it and talk about where that wound came from, so that he could understand her better and nurture that. So similarly, again, with flirting, if it's harmless as long as it's contained, but if you do sort of flirt and there's an intense reaction from your partner, don't just try to dismiss that or explain that you weren't going to do anything. That pain is coming from somewhere. And so use that as an opportunity to get to know them better, to be able to then to understand how they were wounded and how you can support in healing that. And that sort of goes for any kind of conflict or argument where you feel like the anger and rage that you got from your partner isn't fair based on whatever action that you took, whatever behavior it was. It's probably coming from somewhere deeper, and rather than be frustrated with that, take it as an opportunity to draw the two of you guys closer together, have an in-depth conversation about them as individuals and how you can support them and reaffirm the love and the nurturing and all of that in that relationship.
What's the difference between flirtatiousness and genuine care or even love for one of the opposite sex? So, again, you're with good friends.
Yeah.
And is there a line? I mean, what's the difference?
I think that each couple has their own boundaries, and the problem is that sometimes individuals will have their own understanding about it, and again, often the case that each person is coming from a different background, so they have their own different understandings. and they react against one another rather than taking that as an opportunity to really delve into it. So that's where I would encourage that there is no fine line of like where every couple needs to be. I think flirtatiousness, it's fine in a lot of relationships, but I think in others it could trigger a lot of anger, frustration, and pain. Yeah. So it's really about taking those opportunities to really discuss what's going on with the two of you. What's the structure around your relationship? What is it that the two of you want from one another? How do you deem respect in your relationship? What are the appropriate relationships outside of that relationship with same-sex friends or opposite-sex friends? I mean, whatever it is. So yeah, in of itself, is flirtatiousness wrong? No, it's kind of in our nature. It doesn't mean immediately that we like someone else. It could just be the excitement of interacting, the novelty of interacting with someone new. But if you're not getting your emotional needs met in your relationship, and let's say you have an opposite sex friend that you go to a lot to get those needs met, that's, that could be a problem of in itself.
Sure.
Yeah.
Love.
Yes.
It's a special thing, right? And I wonder how many couples actually find true love. And it seems in the beginning, there's always that spark.
Yeah.
But to maintain that love.
That's always the issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's always the issue. It's very rarely is it that I can't love. It's where did the love go wrong? Why didn't it last? Or it went from such intensity to us then being really sort of aggressive or hateful towards one another. How did that shift? I think we have to keep in mind that there's romantic love, which we're all wired for, and it served clear purposes from our evolutionary past to bring two people together in order to procreate, in order to sort of help the survival of the human race. So we're all wired for that, but somehow that kind of love, the initial attraction bit, has been really highlighted in our culture, and really there's a heavy emphasis on those early months or years where that intensity of spark still exists. But the day in, the day out, 10, 15, 20 years, that we don't really discuss too much in culture. And there has to be a very clear recognition, my people, that there is a shift. So eventually the hormonal cocktail that you're in when you're in romantic love will die down, and it's supposed to die down. If you were in that intense state all the time, nothing would get done. As anybody knows, that when they're in those initial stages of love, they can't think about anything else. They're practically obsessed with their partner and their relationship, right? Their schoolwork suffers, their work suffers, their relationship with other people might suffer. They don't want to do anything else but be around that individual. And so to stay in that state would mean that you would not be able to progress in life. So it's supposed to calm down after that. What most people do is they don't realize that, and so all of a sudden when that sort of calms down, they go, oh, what does this mean about this relationship? And they attribute a lot of things to the relationship or to the partner, like they might be the wrong person for me, or we're getting in a lot of conflict and it's just not there anymore, we've fallen out of love. And it's really not about that. There's a natural progression. And you have to move into what sort of psychologists sometimes call companionate love, where there's a deeper sense of connection, compassion there for one another. So the intensity of the passion or the sexual sort of urges dies down, but there's a deeper sense of friendship and connection there. But in order to that, we're not necessarily wired for. That there takes quite a lot of insight and work into. And so when you're in that heightened state, the key is not to just get caught up in that, and just to focus on having fun and enjoying your time with your partner, because they might not be the right person for you. And then that all sort of calms down, and then you realize, oh gosh, there's actually a lot of areas we differ. And that's why, because your friends aren't in that heightened state, they could maybe see conflict in the relationship or differences that might, come up, and they try to tell you and you just can't hear them. But once you come out of that, you're like, oh, that's what they were sort of referring to. So when you're in that heightened state, still engaged in genuinely getting to know that person and understanding if they're a right fit for you. And if they are, continue to work on the bonding process of that relationship. So when that sort of those intense feelings die down, there's a foundation that the two of you have already built on to continue that relationship.
As you're talking, you said a lot of great things there. Thinking about some friends that stick in relationships because they're just trying to make it work. What do these people, what should someone do if they feel stuck or if they have so much time invested? Where do you go with it?
Yeah, I think sometimes people get into these types of relationships because they're not very clear on who they are as individuals, what their values are, and what values they're seeking from a partner. So as I said, romantic love, we're wired for that. It could just happen. So you spend enough time with someone hanging out and having fun, which is sort of the initial stages of dating, you kind of end up sort of falling for them. And then you invest a lot of time and energy into that relationship. And then all of a sudden when you're sort of coming out of that state, you sort of realize, all right, I've already invested sort of 2 years into this. Financially, we might have moved in by then. A lot of people make those big decisions about marriage and the forever thing in that initial couple of years, right? So yeah, there's a high level of risk there now when you're coming out of it. I would say really, really think about who you are. So as individuals going into relationships, seeking that out, really focus on who you are as an individual. So there's sometimes this whole exercise that people will encourage, write down what you want from a partner. And people will get really specific sometimes on the wrong things, like a specific physical appearance or the job, social standing, whatever it is. And really, when I get couples having issues, it's not those things. It's not that, I wanted blue eyes, he has brown eyes, that's creating conflict. It's characteristics. It's the character of the individual. It's the integrity. It's their the mutual values that at the time it weren't an issue to talk about, but all of a sudden they're a couple of years into the relationship, and one sort of value is I want to stay in the city, I want to be in a metropolitan, I want to really grow my career, and the other one is I sort of ready to build a family and move out of the city and move to the country, whatever it is. Things that are very specific to who we are as individuals that might not come up in the earlier years, that you have to know about yourself, and you have to really understand you as an individual and the values that someone else brings to the relationship that are key, and then talk about it throughout the relationship. Don't wait until those issues come up to touch on that, which is what most people do.
Yeah. What would you say to someone who might be a workaholic and their spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever it may be, is not? And they feel left out. They feel like you're spending way too much time. You're staying too long at the office. And and then you come home and you eat and go to bed, and we really don't have the quality time.
So that's another thing is we all have different needs from a relationship. So nowadays the way relationships work is we're not just looking for stability and certainty. We're not just looking for someone that we can buy a home with, have some kids, and sustain a life. It's not functional like it sort of used to be, and someone to hang out occasionally. We're really seeking emotional fulfillment. We're seeking a depth of connection from the person we're with, and that can sometimes differ from person to person. So someone might be getting majority of their emotional fulfillment from a passionate career that they have going on. So their need for a relationship and the time they want to spend with a partner might not be as high. And so when there's a mismatch in that can create quite a lot of conflict as well. So I'd say that's another thing you have to sort of be clear on. It's really wonderful to have all the positive consequences of someone that works a lot and has a great career. There's financially a lot more money coming in or whatever it is, or initially a lot of time to yourself. But that in that person sort of giving that up and staying home, that's going to take a shift and adjustment for both individuals. So again, I would say it's less about looking at what your partner isn't sort of giving you and how you're not getting your needs met, and more about recognizing what those needs are initially, trying to find a partner that has similar types of needs that fit. And again, if you are in a relationship and issues like that come up, like, you know, all of a sudden he's working a lot and you don't like it, it's going to take a shift in the relationship. It's not just about you work less, because that's going to cause something else to shift in the relationship, and both individuals have to be aware of that. So if I want him or her to work less, what part do I play in that to create that shift?
Right. Children.
Yeah.
Do you get into family situations where children can impact the relationship, whether it's a newborn, or whether, you know, the kids are young in elementary school, or whether they're going off to high school or college? I think there's all these different stages that can affect the relationship.
Yeah.
How does one maintain the love relationship as well as the love for the family?
Yeah. So children is a key, and this is one of the issues that should be talked about earlier on, because more and more parents are really invested in their children's sort of outcomes. So if you look at, 30, 40, 50 years ago, kids were outside sort of playing and hanging out more on their own, and there was more just time for adults to be adults.
Right.
And nowadays, just parents are a lot more involved in their children's life and sort of constructing the path they're on.
Are you seeing that here as well as the States?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, we have this term of like helicopter parenting, right? Where parents are hovering over. Yeah. And so I would say one of the key things to keep in mind for parents is one of the best things you can give to your kids above and beyond like swim lessons, dance lessons, and all of that is a healthy, functional relationship. And so if you have to take time out from spending time with them just to reconnect with your partner, you're probably going to do much more good than taking them to an extra lesson of some sort or whatever it is. They need to see that this relationship is solid, because their entire world is built on the home and the relationship that you and your husband and wife have together, or partners have together if they're not married. So again, investing time into your relationship and making sure that you take time out for the ongoing dating or to really talk through issues and stuff you're giving them so much. And sometimes parents don't sort of realize. They think that the relationship with their kids really focuses on the discipline or what sports they play, whatever, how much time they can invest into the kids. And they don't realize that the investment into the relationship adds proportionately to the health of the psychological health of their kids.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Let's talk about you.
Okay.
So, young woman.
Yeah.
Professional, doctor,
yeah.
therapist. You're doing a lot of great things in this world. Where did this come from? How young were you when you started to have aspirations to be so gifted and driven?
Well, I think okay. So I grew up in a family where education was really important, and looking back, I can see how my parents almost shaped my interest and my drive in education. I remember like one of the things my parents would ever mind spending money on was buying books. So there was something I had an attachment to books and I needed to buy the book. And if I read a book, I felt like I had a bond with it and I didn't want to return it to the library. And so that was an area where they financially invested. They understood that. and they didn't mind buying actual books for me to read and keep at home. And anytime there was any kind of like educational activity, I was always allowed to go. I was always sort of encouraged. And in some ways, I grew up in a fairly sort of conservative, strict home, so I wasn't really allowed to go out partying and sort of be out whenever I wanted. There was structure and there were rules. But again, when it came to education, there was a lot of freedom there. So I was initially going sort of at this idea of going into the medical field and pre-med. And I was in this program in high school, and I got selected to go visit Georgetown University, their medical school. And again, my parents didn't really like having me away from home, but that trip, like that was something that they were happy with. So early on, I realized that sort of to seek out a lot of sort of freedom and gain a sense of sort of myself and value in my house was through sort of education. That was something that they never said no to. If it was a school trip, if it was educational, whatever it was, they invested. And so that in that way, they taught me that was sort of significant. And it became significant in my family. So we sat around and talked about the what I learned at school. And I remember when I had like things to do in high school, and I had to stay up really late, like to 12, 1, 2, my mom would stay up with me. So in that way, they really emphasized the value of this in our home, the fact that they themselves were willing to make sacrifices to ensure that knowledge and education really sort of filled up my life.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So in that way, that was really helpful. And then when I went to university, as I said, I was sort of pre-med, but I found myself going to classes and literally finding any reason to skip class that day. It was like, oh, it's sunny outside. How could I be confined into a classroom? I just didn't like. I just didn't like the chemistry classes. I didn't like physiology. I didn't like the classes, but I was taking psychology courses for fun. I hadn't even thought about, I always thought about job as something you work at. You have to put energy and effort into. And my fun courses were psychology. And it came to a point where I was so miserable in going to class and found any reason to skip it that I realized I literally, I can't do this anymore. And so again, I had a long conversation with my parents, because this was a sort of long path that I was on. Starting in my earlier days, I had volunteered at a hospital for a long time in high school. I was involved in all kinds of pre-med programs in school. So that shift was sort of a big one for me. And in talking with them, again, they sort of kind of opened up that space for me to make that shift. And then when I moved into psychology, it just sort of took off. I just really enjoyed it. And I think one of the things I love about psychology is that, the human body is the human body, no matter who you are, where you come from, what your religion, whatever it is. It's all the same. We have the same organs, we're constructed the same. But with psychology, it's not. Everything is different. So as simple as what neighborhood you grew up in could have a massive effect on your psychology. So I could be looking at two people that have similar religions, similar culture, similar whatever, but they're never going to be two the same type of individuals. And I love that. So when I get clients, it engages my own sort of interest and critical thinking. I can't ever say I know enough now, So yeah, I find it really, it's so much fun.
Do you remember that aha moment when you said, okay, this is what I want to do?
God, did I, that aha moment really came from, I remember the specific call that I made to my parents to go, I don't want to do pre-med anymore. I remember exactly where I was, because I was so terrified of the disappointment in them as well. And yeah, I just remember them being like, okay, so psychology is your thing. And I was like, I think psychology, again, because I was so focused on the pre-med,
right.
I hadn't even allowed myself to engage in any other thoughts. I just knew I couldn't do this anymore. And my minor was psychology, so I thought, I'll just shift into psychology, because I love going to those classes. And so when I had the talk with them and they kind of stepped back and allowed me to like really talk about it more and more, I realized, oh my God, this is what I actually do love it. Mm-hmm. I just hadn't allowed myself to accept that before. So yeah, that phone call I specifically remember, because then the next day I was sort of on it.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and so.
My niece Gabriella is getting her master's in psychology.
Okay.
And it seems like she is really loving it as well. And it's just nice to see
yes.
Young men or women,
yeah.
When they find something that they like and they're passionate about it and they work toward it, and
yeah.
you know, it's a wonderful career.
Yeah, it's a different world we exist in now. You know, back in the day when it came to a career or a relationship, people necessarily weren't looking for, again, emotional fulfillment. A career back then meant like a good, solid sort of career. You can like make enough money, you can retire on it, you can provide for your family, you know, that maybe the hours were good to be able to be flexible enough to spend some time with family, you get good vacation time or holiday time. But now it's about, how does it spark you? How does it make you happy? How much emotional fulfillment you get from that? So, which is really cool. But also it's harder. It takes a while. You have to grow into who you are to know what really sparks your interest and brings about fulfillment. And so it takes a little bit of time. And I think the best thing parents could do is sort of step back a little bit and allow for that space. And sometimes, again, being from past generations where things didn't work out like that, that could be sort of a bit frustrating, you know, because the other way that conversation could have gone is, but you've now invested, you know, 2.5 years into this degree, and you're going to go and change your major, you know, and possibly take another year or whatever it is, and all the problems that could potentially come along with me sort of shifting. And they didn't do that, so they sort of stepped back, and I think I really appreciate that in them. So yeah.
Any advice for young people out there, even parents that have kids that are getting ready to go into school, be it psychology, any advice that you'd give on this path as a career? You've been through it. Yeah,
I'm thinking back to like where areas I needed more clarity on, that I can shed some light on that. I think the thing to remember is that there's sort of two different major paths in psychology. Either you become a therapist, a counselor, sort of a clinician, or you go into the academic research realm. And that wasn't something that was entirely clear to me when I went into sort of my master's. I kind of fell into it without realizing the clear distinction that has. Okay. I just happened to love the university I was sort of going to go into, and I like met the staff and really loved them, and ended up like in the counseling realm, thank God. But I wrapped around and came back into research, and I've kind of found a way to combine those two, but it's not often done that way. And so, you know, to know that if you're going to go into a psychology degree, make sure you know whether it's a research degree, a counseling degree, and what that sort of means, and the amount of work that you're going to be doing. Psychology in of itself it's so broad. You know, and so you're thinking, oh, psychology, and then you go into a research program and you're thinking you're going to be interacting with people all the time. No, it's going to be data most of the time, so that you're going to be working with. And so it sort of means different things. And also, there's so much to study in psychology. It's not sort of just about so I've sort of picked dating and relationships, right? But there's tons of other areas you can go into. So really paying attention to sort of who you are and what you're drawn to, and narrowing it down, because the field itself is so wide.
Wonderful. Great advice. Dr. Kathrine, this has been amazing. I wish we had more time.
Yeah,
we could go into a lot more detail.
Yeah.
Maybe we could do it again when I come back to London. But we will definitely keep in touch with you. We will share the links with folks so they could reach out to you. And anything else that you want to leave us with?
No, I mean, know yourself. know yourself and know how to communicate who you are to the outside world, whether that's in a romantic relationship or in relationships of any kind. The more you know yourself and the clearer you are about who you are, and you embody your own values, the more likely you are to attract the right people into your life. So it's not about going and finding that person, making a list and like looking out for that person. It's really about becoming that individual and bringing that into the relationship. Because even if you found the perfect person, if you're not that kind of person and you're not living your own sort of values, they can only contribute 50% of that relationship. You're the other half of it. So it's still not going to be your ideal relationship. So know yourself, communicate it clearly, and don't compromise in terms of who you are as an individual.
Love it. As Brian Rose says, become your best self.
Absolutely. And then you will attract the best partner for that.
That's right.
Best self. Yeah.
Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise.